Good evening. So I'm going to invite you to think about something. It turns out it's a pretty good segue from what we just finished in. I'd like to invite each of you to think about back when you were a senior in high school and having to make a decision about where you were going to go to college, where you would spend the next year or more of your life. For me, it takes back to 1989, Lowell High School. Tapered pants, big hair, bigger dreams. And in Lowell, one of the things I really varied about my experiences there was it was a very diverse school. It was one of the biggest schools in the state. We had over 2,000 students. And of those, at the time, over 50% were students of color. It also is no surprise it's so diverse because it's an immigrant city I grew up in. So it started with the mills and the canals and the folks coming and digging those and coming to work there. But wave after wave of immigrants would come into the city, and that was still happening when I was there. So there were Irish neighborhoods, French neighborhoods, Lithuanian, Polish, Puerto Rican, Laotian, Cambodian, you name it, there was a neighborhood or a group of folks. And I am just a conglomerate of several of those. And I really valued that diversity. So as I was making my decision about where to go to school, I had about 5 colleges to choose from. And they were all a little bit different, but all good schools. Some urban, some rural, some liberal arts, some technical, some bigger, smaller. I knew I'd make a fine choice. But on the card that I received from the college where I had to check off, I will attend, it asked me why. Why will you choose this college? So after some debate, I had visited the schools and spent some time at them. I had no trouble filling out the card. I checked off the school I wanted to go to, and it said why, and I said because of the socioeconomic and cultural diversity of your students. It was huge for me then, and it's still huge today. What's ironic is that diversity that I valued and I sought after and I went after diminished as my higher education and professional career advanced. So I went to school, and it was diverse, but it wasn't as diverse as my high school because already most of the kids there were those whose parents had gone to college. And since we all don't go to college at equal rates from different groups of people, it was already cutting down on the diversity. Then I came out to the Northwest, and I worked for the environmental industry. And that was not very diverse either. Most of the people I worked with, they looked a lot like me, and they had similar backgrounds. And they were all great people, but I lost my diversity. I lost that thing I valued. And then I went and I taught high school, and the teachers came from similar backgrounds as well. So I was disappointed, but I loved the things I did, and I ended up migrating over to Microsoft. And while I was there, I discovered there was a little bit of an interesting link. That's where it started to dawn on me that diversity and education seemed to be inversely related. I had a lot of positions to hire for while I was there, and while I was looking for people, we couldn't find people in this local, beautiful community who had the qualifications and the experience that we needed. I ended up hiring people from China, from Australia. I worked with people from India, from all over the world. So I appreciated the global diversity, but I was sad that in this large community here, we couldn't find the people we wanted. Well, it turns out that it's related again to education and diversity. Education-wise, Washington State is the 46th worst in the nation, not 46th worst, it's 46th among all states in the nation for sending kids to college out of high school. That's a pretty staggeringly low number. And if you think of diversity on that, since kids don't go at equal rates from different groups, you're getting even fewer kids from all the different backgrounds there. So one way of looking at that is even those kids, even the ones who are high achievers, just look at those real high achieving kids. And among those kids, low income kids are less than half likely to attend college than their high income counterparts. That was upsetting to me. So I ended up migrating back into the education space to make a difference in this and working at College Access Now. And while I was there, I've had to hire. It took me 5 months to find somebody who had the qualifications that we needed to fill the position. So I know that education is an issue, and I know that diversity comes back into it again. That's an issue. So we're working on trying to increase the number of kids going to college and the diversity of kids who are going to college. So just a little story recently about CAN. We recently had a visit at our office at Franklin High School, one of the 3 places we operate, the 3 schools. And that visit was from a reporter. He came over to interview our students to understand how they were getting into school and what their stories were. And I was a little nervous because when he showed up, none of the kids were in the office yet. One of them finally showed up, and they started talking. But the connection wasn't quite there. And slowly, sort of started to warm up, and then she walked over to the wall. We have this big wall, and it's covered in papers. And she pointed to like 9 of the papers on the wall. Those were the schools where she had been accepted to. Those were her acceptance letters, copies of them on the wall. That really got the conversation going, and they sat down. And then I felt all of a sudden like I had been transformed inside of The Hobbit, the story, as Bilbo Baggins is greeting all the dwarves, because I melted into the background, and the door opened, and a few more CAN students came in, and then a few more, and a few more. And as each of the students came in, they would kind of settle in and ask a few questions, but each one of them would go to the wall because every one of the kids that walked in there had at least one letter on that wall showing them that they had gotten into college. So at the end, there's like 10 kids around the table, and they're all talking to this reporter, Danny Westneat from the Seattle Times, and they're talking and chatting. It goes fine. They leave, and he turns to me and he asks me, one of the questions he asks is, well, they were great, but what about those other kids, the kids who have that attitude about not wanting to go to college, or the ones who don't want to go to college? And something didn't strike me right. I was really upset about the question. I'm like, what do you mean? Or we help kids with the GPA from 2.0 to 4.0, and et cetera. And it hit me. I understood after a little bit what it was. Most kids actually do want to go to college. When you survey high school sophomores, even after that point, when a lot of kids have lost their connection to school for random reasons, over 80% of all kids still have higher education aspirations. Over 80%, right across the board. So we are reaching those. What Danny didn't know was sitting around that table were a bunch of kids, some of them with 2.2 GPAs. But some of them had swagger. I mean, there was one kid there, he's a poet, and he's been on the Poetry Slam. He just walks in with his confidence. And there are these young ladies, she's got this listed 9 schools, but they weren't all excellent students. They weren't all people that we'd pegged for college. They were kids who had aspirations. And the difference is that we were able to reinforce their aspirations and their dreams and not limit them. And these kids do succeed in college. It's not just a matter of getting them there. My favorite example, I use it over and over because I know her, I've met her, and I've talked to her, is Adriana, who applied to school. She came out of school with a 2.3 GPA. She applies, she really wants to go to college, 4-year college. We're like, 2.3 GPA, well, we'll help you, we'll do what we can. She gets into Eastern Washington University because one of the things that we do at CAN is we take kids through a whole series of things, including college visits and ACT prep and writing your essays and filling out your applications. So she goes through this whole process. She gets into Eastern Washington. She gets out there. First term, 3.7 GPA. I mean, these kids can. They can succeed. It's a matter of reinforcing beliefs. And sometimes we fall down and we have failures. We have a girl, Jessica, who went up to Western, and she struggled. And some things happened at home, and she had to drop out. She called us, and she said, I want to stay in school. What do I do? She came down. She's enrolled in community college. She's pursuing. She's going on. We have another student that we actually worked with, summer search with, a Gates Millennium Scholar. He's been to multiple schools. He had this big plan to go to California, and then he ended up in Oregon, and now he's back in Washington. He's still in school, and we're still there reinforcing that belief. And I think the difference that I couldn't explain to Danny that day is that the difference is, what do you build for people? Do you build and reinforce their dreams, or do you help them build a shell around them so that you hear things from them like, I didn't want to go to college anyway? They might have. We'll never know because we didn't reinforce that. So in the end, College Access Now, we've had some pretty good success getting kids to college. We've got 379 kids, 100% of our seniors have gained acceptance for 6 years to college. So it works. So from this work, and in the end, back to my sort of perspective in my life, I believe we can have that diversity at work, in our communities, and our leaderships, and just in our neighborhoods. It's just that we need to have the educational opportunities there for all kids. We need to together change the way we think about who should go to school, where they can go to school, and where they can succeed. Just like I think one of our speakers earlier was referring to, we need to change the way we think about how we're taking advantage of what kids are learning when we're teaching them. Are we saying why they can't learn, or are we saying what they've brought to the table? So I think that was Bernadette. And anyway, systemic change is something we can do together when we reinforce beliefs, and I know that that diversity can come back into my life and to all of our lives. So thank you for being a part of this with us and for supporting it.